All of our viewers this morning, Jeremy Hunt, know that in the last few years, under successive Conservative governments, the economy has been bumping along the bottom and people have felt terribly hard up. So you're not going to sit here this morning, surely, and say, actually, what you left behind was all peaches and cream?
Not at all. We faced in the last 14 years 3 massive global shocks. The pandemic, the energy shock, clearing up after the financial crisis.
This is now getting ridiculous. How much longer are UK news shows going to allow the former Chancellor to deliberately avoid Brexit in his list of things battering the UK economy? The former Chancellor has repeatedly sought to take the public for fools by doing this, and so far he's got away with it, completely unchallenged.
You talk about living standards. What has actually happened since 2010? They've gone up in real terms by about £1,700 for the average family. But obviously when you have a pandemic and an energy crisis, they're going to take a hit. What wins elections, because the British public are very smart, is if they can see a government has taken difficult decisions to sort out problems. And they know that we've had a pandemic, we've had an energy crisis. To point out, as the Labour Party do, that living standards have fallen this Parliament without mentioning the pandemic or the energy crisis is taking everyone for fools.
Seriously? By almost every economic and financial measure, the hard Brexit his government willfully inflicted on the country has been disastrous for the UK. The OBR, that's the Office for Budget Responsibility, says Brexit will reduce the UK's potential GDP by 4% in the long run by lowering the trade intensity of the economy. Goldman Sachs puts it at 5%. And the National Institute of Economic and Social Research calculates it at up to 6%. Earlier this year, the then Chancellor was allowed to run around UK news shows unchallenged, telling the public this.
The OBR says because of the decisions that I've taken, GDP will be 0.7% higher than it would otherwise have been.
But what the then Chancellor failed to mention, and which wasn't pointed out to viewers, is the same report also said this.
We continue to expect that Brexit will reduce the UK's potential GDP by 4% in the long run by lowering the trade intensity of the economy.
The OBR's analysis chimed with that of the Bank of England by showing that a long-term squeeze on the country's economic potential from Brexit is playing out as they had feared.
We need 3 things: growth, growth, growth.
That's absolutely right, but thanks to Brexit, UK business is now being crucified by additional red tape and extra costs, and it gets worse. New post-Brexit UK border controls, which came into force in April, are estimated to cost British businesses £2 billion and will likely fuel higher inflation. And the UK goods trade has suffered its steepest 5-year fall on record, with economists saying this highlights how Brexit has reduced flows both into and out of Britain. And if all that's not bad enough, the Resolution Foundation has cited the economic effects of Brexit as one of the factors which have acted to suppress wage growth. Which brings us back to this.
Growth, growth, growth.
Bloomberg has calculated that Brexit is costing the UK £100 billion a year in lost output. That's roughly £40 billion less for the new Labour government to invest in the UK. Just think about that. It's £40 billion less to invest in our hospitals and our schools and our public services that we all rely on. So if the Prime Minister is serious about growing the economy, we need to have a proper grown-up conversation about the negative impact of Brexit. We need to look again at the frictions and trade barriers which Brexit has created. And we need to do it urgently for all the small and medium-sized companies that are the backbone of British business. They're the ones trying to export to the EU, and because of the huge amount of paperwork, change in regulations and extra costs, many are giving up. Every week we're losing growth and trade with the EU, and that just can't go on. And UK news shows need to start stepping up and holding those responsible for all of this to account.